A few weeks ago, I gave a lecture in Prague, and I had the chance to see the famous castle, a castle that overlooks this tiny and beautiful city. And I heard that this real castle is actually the source of inspiration for Franz Kafka's famous novel, The Castle, that I read many years ago. The novel The Castle describes a situation where you try to reach a certain goal, to find the castle who is controlling the city that is built around it, and you cannot do that. And when I was in Prague, I observed why people think that this is really the inspiration, because the castle is built in a very unique way where you have to go around in circles to reach it, and every time you think you reach the end of the way. So you cannot see behind the corner. You reach a certain point, it looks like it's the end, but there's nothing there. So you go further, and then again a corner that you cannot see around. At a certain point you cannot even enter a certain area, and you've never entered actually the castle. That's a very unique structure. And I remember that when I read Kafka's novel, it reminded me of one of the most common nightmares that I had, especially going to school, in the army, large bureaucratic systems. I had this nightmare where I tried to do something that's supposed to be very, very simple. Let's say to hand in an exam. And I'm not able to do it because something always happens. So I go to the front gate, it's locked. I try to find another gate, I go in, the secretary is not in the office. I find eventually the secretary, they say that they don't accept the test anymore. There's always going to be another hurdle that prevents me from reaching my very, very simple goal. And that's exactly the feeling that the castle, the novel describes. You can never reach a certain goal. It's nicely observed when you can see a physical castle, but it's also a predicament that we find many times in life. So what I'm going to do in this video is say a little bit about the novel and how it fits into the work of Kafka. And then I'm going to speak a little bit about what it means for people that live today and how they can fight against this very problematic situation of being always observed by this powerful castle, and instead try to build their own castle, build their own personality, their own life that they can be satisfied with. My name is Shai Lotan. I'm Associate Professor of International Public Law at the University of Copenhagen Faculty of Law, and the purpose of this series of lectures is to improve your English and your research skills. Before getting to the story behind the castle, let's speak a little bit about Franz Kafka. So Franz Kafka is a brilliant author. He died young from tuberculosis. He gave an order to destroy all his writings to his good friend Max Brod, who decided to ignore it, and published a series of masterpieces that are still read today. Several things make Franz Kafka unique. His German is very easy. I can say that as somebody who doesn't know German very well, but I enjoy reading Franz Kafka in German. It's not a very large vocabulary, it's very, very simple, and that's definitely one of his advantages. But beyond that, he has a very unique style. So unique, in fact, that the word Kafkaesque entered the English language. It's not a very common thing when the name of the author represents a certain frame of mind or a certain atmosphere, but the word Kafkaesque does do that. And what is this Kafkaesque situation? It's the feeling of facing an impassable bureaucracy, for example, impassable hurdles that are usually associated with modern life. These hurdles show disregard for human suffering. They don't show any form of caring or of empathy. And that's exactly what leads a person to feel in this Kafkaesque situation. Now, the castle, as you can already know from what I've said so far, is a good depiction of that, because you try to reach a castle and you can never do that. So there is this feeling of distance, this feeling of constant hurdles towards the goal. But in order to understand it properly, I think it's useful to take a look at two other of Kafka's creations. Both are really my favorite from the many that I've read. And one is, not surprisingly, The Trial. So The Trial is another novel that was found after Franz Kafka died. It is complete as opposed to The Castle. And the novel is describing a person named K, which probably refers back to Kafka himself, being the first letter of his name. And he's positioning his protagonist, similar to himself, in an impossible situation where somebody tries to start a trial against him. And he's very surprised. He doesn't recall making anything criminal. And he's trying everything possible to understand what is it exactly that he did wrong. So what is it exactly that the trial is about? And throughout the entire novel, he doesn't understand. He's going to a courtroom. Nobody there makes any sense. People are just talking nonsense. He's trying all kinds of possibilities to understand what's going on. He never really understands the law. There's a metaphor there of the law being kind of a closed door that you have to wait all your life for it, and it will never open for you. And that's the door that is only for you, your only way of being observed by the law. Think about that in a society controlled by bureaucracy 100 years ago. It's already something that is a very scary situation. You are not really able to monitor even a fraction of the information that the authorities have about you. You don't know where this information is going, how it's going to affect your life. This feeling of fear, of insecurity, is the key to Kafka's creation. Now, imagine Kafka living today, where technology allows any company that has access to the clicks that you make when you go to Facebook or YouTube to build a very, very good prediction of what you're going to do next based on 5 minutes, an hour of you surfing the web. Much more information. There are cameras everywhere. I'm speaking to a camera. There are cameras in the streets. There is information that is generated by everything that we do online. And all this information goes into a lot of different people or a lot of different organizations that control them. Now, this is already something that we're definitely aware of in the 21st century. But now we are also going to have entities or agents that are using AI to control this information. Maybe they're even going to have certain goals or incentives that we don't understand. So maybe they're going to use it in a variety of different ways. You see how relevant this kind of thinking is? So that's the thinking that we see in the trial, this impossible burden of facing bureaucracy continuously and not being able to look through it and understand it. And today this is doubled a millionfold. The authorities have much more information. We don't really have privacy. The ability to process this information is much greater. And everything is, just like you see in the trial, behind closed doors, within a black box that we cannot access. We can't understand why the authorities are doing what they're doing. And we don't have any way to criticize it, to fight against it, to compromise with it, to negotiate with it. All these things are beyond us. That's the story of The Trial, a novel. Another story that I think is worth thinking about in relation to understanding the castle is a famous story, Metamorphosis. Metamorphosis is a story of a man, Gregor Samsa, who wakes up one morning and finds out that he is an insect. The story depicts the pain and the suffering involved with being shunned away by your family and your close ones, and being viewed as something that is potentially inferior, potentially disgusting. The others, when you are viewed as something that is disgusting, the others view you. You don't view them. You don't have a way to assess them aesthetically, morally. They are the ones doing this to you. And that's a very powerful depiction of that by basically showing how the protagonist is going from being a person that can work among others and observe them and interact with them to a person that is just being observed with disgust. Now, it's not a coincidence that I'm using these terms. I didn't make up these terms at all. There's a lot of postmodernic literature that follows this idea of, if I can observe others, I am powerful. If others can observe me, they are the ones that are powerful. I am the powerless person. I am the vulnerable person. This is something that you see a lot in the work of Michel Foucault, for example. One of the terms that is often used, Michel Foucault speaks a lot about the panopticon. The panopticon is an experimental prison that was designed by Jeremy Bentham based on the idea that the prisoners will never see the guards, but the guards will see the prisoners 24/7. In every possible angle, in every possible time of the day, the guards see the prisoners and the prisoners cannot see who is watching them. So the feeling of being, like in the trial, subject to a bureaucracy that you can't control, is a feeling of being observed without being able to observe back. The same goes to the feeling of being a disgusting being, an insect in Metamorphosis. You are observed and you cannot observe back. You cannot express your judgment back. You can't interact. Now, with this background, it's easier to understand the story about the castle, because the story is actually very simple. A man named K, just like in the trial, and again, just like the first letter in Kafka's name, arrives in the new city. He has a very simple task, which should not take long. I think he's supposed to measure some agricultural lands or something like this. And he realizes that all the power in the city is concentrated in the castle, and he realizes that there's been some mistake in his original job description. So he needs to find out what he needs to do. Sounds simple, right? The problem is that the castle is not accessible. Everybody that he meets, from the farmers, knows that all the important decisions, everything that is of value, is decided in a castle. But nobody knows how to get into the castle. And that's exactly the problem. Now, the point where the story becomes a nightmare is a point where the protagonist decides that his goal is to reach the castle. And this goal is all the time escaping from him. Just like in the nightmares that I had as a child, just like in the castle over Prague, you never are able to see the end. You're never able to reach the castle. You're never able to reach your goals. You're constantly going around in circles, grasping for something that disappears every time you get close to it. So that is exactly the story of the castle. It's quite a long novel, even though it's not complete. And all the time it goes around in circles. So he decides to marry somebody just because she was getting close to the castle. Everything that he does is to get close to the castle. It becomes an obsession that controls everything that he does every day, all the time. And this is exactly the feeling that this novel conveys. The castle is something that you can never reach, but can always observe you. Something that you do everything possible to get into, but cannot even understand what is there. Who is there? What are its values? You can never judge them. You can never assess them. That, in essence, is the story of the castle. It took me many years to understand that, but I think the only way to avoid being locked in this nightmare, trying always to reach the castle that you cannot observe and judge, always failing when you try to do so, is to create your own castle, your own system of values, something that you can determine, that you can use to observe others, to observe the world, to assess everything that you do. Let's try to explain how I reach this conclusion step after step. For example, when I was engaged with something very difficult, like trying to find a job in a very crowded academic market, I realized that there are three types of tasks that I could take upon myself. One would be to try to change the world in a way, change the castle. If I see something that I think is wrong, fight through it until I amend it. Now, I don't want to sound like a cynic, but trying to do that effectively and across a lot of different institutions that we have in life is something that is doomed to fail. I mean, if you're working in a very, very small pool, so to speak, you can try to do that. If not, trying, especially when as a beginner, to change things from the bottom up is very, very, very difficult to do. I don't think there are many people who have done it. And again, the more we live in a connected world, in a global world, in a world that uses tools like AI that are getting more and more complicated, we cannot even observe what we're doing, and large, systems of data that are not available to us, we cannot really do that. So if you are deciding to fight against the system fully, you can have my respect, and I think that there are a few people that manage to do that profitably, so at least for society. So anyway, getting off the grid in some respects and then just bombarding the courts with claims over particular issues. There are people who change society like this, and that's probably a good thing. But I don't think that this is something that most people can do, or that is a road towards happiness. And anyway, most people don't take this route anyway. So let's put it aside for a second. The other two alternatives are something that I think a lot of people kind of struggle with. So they say, I want to be authentic. Okay, so when I'm at work, I will bring the same personality that I have at home. And because I'm at work most of the day or most of my effective hours, then I'm going to carry over this personality with me to my personal life. I'm authentic. Okay, if I work, let's say I worked as a prosecutor. So I work as a prosecutor. I am a prosecutor, and when I go off duty, when I read the newspaper, I'll be interested to see how much, what is the penalty that criminals got, and be happy if it's a high criminal penalty, just to make it simple. But that's the kind of things that you should do. Okay, so if you are a prosecutor, then you see the world for a particular lens. There's nothing wrong with this lens. It's just that this is exactly what is required from you at your place of work. Another possibility is to say, I am me. So I am Shai, that's my name. I am a father. I have certain hobbies. I have certain things that I like. And I have a job. Now, I'm associate professor of international public law at the University of Copenhagen Faculty of Law. And when I do my work, I do it as well as I can. But when I don't do my work, I don't have to take on the weight of carrying the work with me everywhere. Now, I want to say it's not just about how many hours you work or how seriously you take your work. It's something much deeper than that. The question is, how much of a personality do you have besides your work? Or anything else that you do that is a major part of your life. So if you are, if you're a soldier or something like this, then that's an issue. If you are a student, then that's the main issue. If you are just active socially or politically, then that's your main thing. If you're an athlete, and that's your main thing. Whatever it is that you are using to get money, to get prestige, to get recognition, to get social interaction that fills up your day. This is your main objective during your effective hours. And my recommendation is that you decide to say, when I'm not doing that, I can easily have a different personality. I have my own castle in a way. So a person that will do something like this may work just as hard, the same amount of hours as a person that is authentic, sometimes even more, because they will find less conflict. If they have to do something at work that they're not very happy with, say, fine, I do it because I have to do it, but I can still be unhappy with it. I don't have to be 100% in accordance with everything that my job requires me to do. So I can say, I'm a prosecutor, I send this person to jail, and I did the proper thing, and he got exactly the penalty that I expected. Personally, I think this person should be in prison at all. Why? Because I think that he's a hero, because I think that the system is corrupt, because I think that he's a victim of society that ruined his life, and so on and so on and so on. And the more I'm able to, to find it in me, to complete these thoughts, and to tell to myself, okay, I don't agree with the system as a whole, even though I'm part of it, the more I will be free. Because every time that I do that, I'm basically saying I create my own castle. I'm able to observe and to judge, and others cannot observe and judge me. Because I'm able to say, I don't believe in the system that sent this person to jail, even though I'm taking a part in it in my daily life. And I'm able to observe this person and others and say, this is wrong, or sometimes exactly the opposite. I think this is excellent, or you should get a higher penalty. I don't. This works both ways, but I'm just able to exercise this judgment by myself. Now, this is, I think, a concept that is useful to keep in your mind, to say to yourself, I have my own castle, I have my own principles, my own values, and I make the decision, not me as a cog in a machine, as a prosecutor in this particular branch, in this particular district, but me as a person. And I can tell you from my own experience that doing that is very hard. So it helps to formulate this distinction and say, I am losing something by being a person of multiple personalities, so to speak, because I'm not fully authentic in every part. So I'm not, when I'm doing my work, I'm not fully accepting what I'm doing. I'm not fully happy with what I'm doing. And after work, I'm aware of the fact that what I did throughout most of my day is something that I don't necessarily agree with. But despite all that, I think it's a better system, because if you try to keep this authenticity, the friction with life would eventually wear you down, or wear most people down. And some people, that's not true. And some people are able to actually assume a position and be the perfect lecturer that always cares about the students, that is never cynical about what the system can do, and is happy with that and go all the way until the pension doing that. I have only admiration for these people, and I think there are very, very few. It's better for most people to say, okay, I do this job, I do a good job when I do that, and then I have something else that I try to measure myself against. So how do you do that? How do you adopt my recommendation? Build your own castle, have something that allows you to observe the world on your own premises. First thing, let's start from the basics. If you're not healthy, you cannot do that. Somebody that is not healthy is always going to be in a position of some sort of insect observed by society. So you have to eat properly, eat healthy food. You have to sleep enough. You have to exercise regularly. These things are non-negotiable. Nobody can do well without them. So beyond that, try to care about the basics first. So if you have some level of financial security, this helps. You don't want to be in a position where if your next paycheck doesn't come, you don't know what to do. Even if you manage, it's just a very stressful position to be in. So if you have a little bit of money in your bank account, that's always good. Most importantly, look for a partner and have children when you still can. because that's really, for me, has always been the highest goal of my life, and the highest way for me to have my own system of values, because my kids are mine, and I love them, and I think they're the best, and I don't care what anybody else thinks about them, and I never will. That's my metric against which I measure everything. So especially when I had my first son Adam, I measured everything in the world around what would make him happy, or what would make him successful, everything. I am very happy that I had my other son Ron, who, as his name suggests, brought happiness to my life, but also brought me this ability to say, okay, there are multiple, there are already now 2 sons, so there are different things that can lead to happiness and to success. So these are metrics that I think you can measure yourself against, and use your own set of values and principles. If you have children, that's very, very good. If you have a partner that you love, that's very, very good. In addition to that, try to look for things that are interesting for you that are not necessarily interesting for others. Read books regularly. And by regularly, I mean that, every week or 2, at least, you finish a book. That's just part of your lifestyle. And then every week or 2, you will read something else about history, about psychology, about philosophy, novels, stories. It doesn't matter. The issue is that while you're reading, you're basically saying, this is interesting for me, and I will not be compensated about it by somebody else. And I don't care about it because that's important for me now. One of the things that I hated the most when doing the PhD was when I said, I read this book, and people were kind of asking me, in which system, or how does this fit into your research? And I just said, it doesn't. I never thought that it should. And a lot of people, when they do a PhD, just stop completely to read other things. The sad thing is, when I did my PhD, people did it for like 5-6 years, and didn't have to publish at the same time or apply for grants. Now it's even much more stressful. So it's hard to do that, but that's something that you have to do. So keep learning things that are not directly beneficial for you. That's very, very useful. And once you've done all that, then you can once in a while sit down and try to think to yourself, or better yet, walk in the nature, or even exercise, or just try to reflect about what are your own metrics that are not imposed on you from the outside. And you would say, these are the things that make things ugly or beautiful for me, good or evil for me, efficient or inefficient, beneficial or harmful. The variety of grades, of spectrums that I determined for myself, that are not imposed on me from the outside. There are even spectrums that the outside doesn't recognize. So I can say, for example, if in my work, nobody cares about whether something is funny or not funny, but I care. So I have a grade of funny to not funny. So you're not only determining how things score on your grade, you're having metrics that are not even relevant to the other castle, to the people that observe you from the outside, if it's your work or if it's any social system that is constraining for you. And you even have things that don't fit into any metric, just things that you enjoy to do, or that you find interesting in ways that you cannot explain. So think about it as a three-part process. First of all, understand the situation. Understand that you are allowed, and it's even recommended, to say, I am different than what other people think I am. I am not only the social point on the social network. I'm not only the employer or the employee. I define to myself who I am separately from society. That's the first step. And you do it in a very, very, detailed and conscious way. Second, I give myself the capacity to do that properly by being healthy, wealthy enough, happy, supported by a family, and continuously learning or engage in things that are interesting for me. And third, I consciously try to think and to assess for myself what I think is important, what I think are the grading systems that I can use. And this will allow me to make decisions that are good for me, and this will allow me to escape from Kafka's castle, because I'll be able to say to myself, I am observing the world, I make the decisions, others cannot observe me, they cannot force me to do things that I don't want to do. That is all for today. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, I hope that you will like and subscribe to it. You're welcome to write me comments. I always find those very, very useful. Until next time, keep learning.